Hey, I'm Yadi. Happy MALS Awareness Day. In today's video, I want to talk a little bit about one of my conditions called MALS, and I'll be giving you guys a little bit of basic info on that condition, and I'll also be sharing my story on how I got my MALS diagnosis and also how I ended up having to have surgery last November to treat this condition. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so MALS stands for median arcuate ligament syndrome, and it is a vascular compression syndrome. And I'll be looking down because I have some notes here that I got from the Mayo Clinic website as well as the Cleveland Clinic and the MALS Foundation website, just so that I don't forget the important stuff. And I'll post the links down below too in case you guys want to read about this more in depth. So MALS is when the arc-shaped band of tissue in the chest area, which is the median arcuate ligament that's in the name, when it presses on the artery that sends blood to the upper abdomen, and that artery is called the celiac artery. MALS is also known by other names such as celiac artery compression, celiac access syndrome, and Dunbar syndrome. And some of the symptoms, are caused, they may be due to a lack of blood flow through the celiac artery or compressions on the nerves in the area. And some of the symptoms are, well, the main one is epigastric pain and pressure, which may go away when leaning forward, as well as stomach pain after eating, exercising, or changing your position. There's also bloating, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, and it can also cause delayed gastric emptying. Now for the tests, usually because MALS is so rare, like if you go see a doctor first and they'll try to, rule out any other like more common things, and because a lot of the symptoms are, kind of like in the realm of like GI issues, they'll try to first rule out anything like that. So they'll do like your typical, GI tests like, CTs, x-rays, endoscopies, maybe even like a gastric emptying scan to rule out gastroparesis. But the tests used, like the actual tests used to look for MALS, there's two main ones, and one of them is called mesenteric duplex ultrasound. It has to be done with the breathing protocol. Like the doctor actually has to order the test done with the breathing protocol, otherwise it will be harder for the MALS to show up, I believe. And there's also the CT angiogram with breathing protocol again, which is done because that's like how it shows up easier on the test with the breathing protocol, which is, I think when they take like they take the scans when you're like, I think either inhaling or exhaling, and so that's how it shows up like more clearly, the when the artery is being compressed when they use the breathing protocol. And so once they do the test, and if they find on the test that your artery is being compressed, the celiac artery, then you have different treatment options, which are essentially the main one is like surgery, which they have like 3 different options. There's like, the minimally invasive options like the laparoscopic or the robotic surgery to do the decompression of the ligament, And then there's also the like traditional open surgery, which is, you know, obviously they open you up like completely, and obviously that's probably like, you know, you have a longer recovery time from that because they're, you know, they're opening you up. And then there's also another option, which is placement of a stent in the artery, you know, to open up the stent that's being compressed and let the blood flow through. Typically, that's, from what I've read, that's usually they only do that until only if you've done the other surgery first to release the ligament, and then if that doesn't work, if the artery becomes like compressed again, then they'll place the stent in. But my story is a little bit different, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Another treatment option is also the celiac plexus block. For they use that for pain relief, and also sometimes to confirm diagnosis. Like if a patient gets relief from that, then they know, okay, so this is what's going on with them. And yeah, so that's, like I said, just a little bit about a little background info on what this condition is, and you know, how it affects those of us who have it. So now I'll be sharing how I got my diagnosis and why I decided to kind of pursue this kind of path and try and look and see if it panned out into anything, and also how like what treatment option I ended up deciding to go for. So it kind of all starts last year, early last year, and there's kind of like a gap between like my last video where I talk about how I got my feeding tube, and then all the way until, like I said, like last year, when in between then there's like a lot of stuff that happened, but that would need like a whole other video to kind of go into that. So I'm just gonna start with last year, early last year. I started having well, on and off, I'd been having just some GI issues, stuff like apart from the gastroparesis. It was kind of like spring of last year, my bile reflux came back, and I was having like a lot of problems with that. I was having like you know, really bad nausea, and like anything I try to eat, even like my safe foods, like usually clear liquids, were fine for me in like really small amounts. I couldn't really do that because it kept trying to come back up. I kept feeling like I was gonna throw up, and so if I did take something and like I felt like that I had to drain it out of my G tube, out of the G portion of my GJ, because like I said, I just felt like I was gonna throw up if I didn't drain it. And I was having to do that like every 2-3 days, which, you know, it's not ideal. So, you know, I went to the doctors, and, you know, essentially like they told me that it was probably like it had to do with my gastroparesis, like my slow motility, like maybe it was just really bad and that's what was causing the bile reflux. And so I kind of just like I had convinced the GI doctors like 2 years ago to try like another prokinetic medication to help with my gastroparesis, but I had ended up having to stop it because I thought maybe it was causing me to have to go to the bathroom a lot. But then it ended up like it wasn't that medication that was causing it. It was actually I was having like formula intolerance, and so I had to switch out to another formula. But then I just never really started the medication back up because I felt like after a couple of months, like it lost like its effectiveness anyways, and like helping me eat. So I was like, you know, why take another medication on top of all the other ones I have to take? So So yeah, so like the doctors like told me, you know, try starting that medication again to see if it'll help. And it did help like after a while with like I wasn't able to eat like much still, but it did help with like the bile reflux. So, you know, that was a small win. And then kind of like while I was going through all that, I'd also like the past 2 years I've had issues with like kind of like dysautonomia type symptoms with like getting shortness of breath, heart palpitations, and my heart rate going up whenever I would like if I was sitting down and I would get up real quick, I would like feel like I need to steady myself because I feel like I might pass out, or like I would go from like standing to sitting and like or vice versa, and my heart rate would go up, or even after sometimes after like just walking for 5-10 minutes, my heart, I could feel like the heart palpitations. I would get like shortness of breath, like I ran a mile, but really it was only like very little activity. And then also like my body was like it had like trouble regulating temperature, like I would get overheated really easily, which is not ideal. Living in Texas, we get really awful hot like hell summers, and last year was one of those summers where it was really really hot. It was really hard on me. And also like during and like when it's cold also, you know, I'll sometimes get like really cold, so like my body just like it's just all out of sync with like I said, trying to regulate my temperatures. And then also the fatigue, like if I overdid it, and by overdid it I mean by like walking a little too much, walking just a couple of times in my house or something would cause me like a lot of fatigue. Sometimes I would overdo it, and I would the next day I would just have to end up in bed all day because I just like I would try to get up and I would feel like I was gonna pass out. I'm just like so tired, like my body just felt like way down, like just horrible. And like I said, those symptoms started like I would say around like 2 years ago, but they only started getting like super super bad last year, because like I said, like last year was like we had a really intense hot summer, and it was really hard on me. Like I just the whole summer I essentially couldn't really leave the house. The only time I left the house was for my doctor's appointments, and even that like just took it out of me. So yeah, like all of last year essentially was just like really, my health was just like terrible. And throughout all of this, you know, I was going to the doctors and, you know, telling them, trying to get them to like figure out what was going on. Like for the dysautonomia stuff, I talked to my rheumatologist and she told me to like, you know, see the cardiologist. The cardiologist just like, they didn't like, she had me get an echo done, probably because she was like worried that it was like the pericardial effusion coming back, which it wasn't. Like the echo was fine. And then she had me do a 24-hour heart rate monitor, and that also I think like came out fine. I had mentioned POTS to the cardiologist as like something to look into, because that's what the rheumatologist had brought up to me when I told her about all these symptoms I was having. And the cardiologist was like, well, that's not really something we look into unless we've excluded all other possibilities. And so, like I said, they did those 2 tests, and then after that, because they came out normal, he was just kind of like, oh, you know, the tests were, you know, normal. And she just wasn't really concerned when I was like telling him, you know, I get really like, you know, I get shortness of breath and I feel like I'm gonna pass out after like such little activity. Like it's honestly ridiculous. Like just walking around my house will make me feel like I've run a marathon. But he wasn't really concerned about that, I don't think. He was mostly just like, he mostly just brought up the fact that I have like low blood pressure like continuously, and he told me to monitor that. He was like, just, you know, get a blood pressure cuff at home to monitor that. But I don't really have money for that because I have to pay for my formula out of pocket because the hospital won't cover it, so I wasn't able to do that. And then so like I mentioned, after that I was kind of like, whatever, I'm tired of like trying to convince doctors that stuff is wrong. By that point I was just like, I'll just try and find a way to manage it at home. But I mean, it was hard because like I said, it was a really, really hot, horrible summer. Also, like, I wasn't really able to take in much orally. Like, I would try to take as much like fluids as I could, like drink stuff like juice and like Pedialyte, eventually like Gatorade, but because it was just like small sips, it didn't really make a difference. And then like through my tube I wasn't able to I would try to put in like clear Pedialyte because that's the one that didn't like bother me through the tube, but I was only able to put really small amounts because also like flushing through my tube would cause me like really intense pain and nausea. So essentially, yeah, that was just like, summer was just horrible for me. I didn't really leave the house for months at all. I just spent most of my time in bed, which was, it wasn't ideal. I know it sounds like fun, like, spending your time in bed doing nothing. It wasn't, it wasn't fun. Anytime I wanted to do something, I couldn't. It was really frustrating, like essentially being bedridden. Like I had to ask for help from my family because I live at home with my parents, and I'm lucky that I had them. I had to ask them for help sometimes just to even like get up and like go to the bathroom because I was scared that I was just gonna pass out. It's hard to have to be so dependent on others for things like that. Like eventually it just ended up getting to a point where it was just like really bad, like I said, the dysautonomia type stuff, but also like my GI issues ended up like getting worse. Like last summer I started having issues again, I think with like tolerating my formula. It seemed like I was just having to go to the bathroom a lot, and eventually it like, and I'll admit I kind of waited to bring that up to the doctors because like I said, they took months with the whole like bile reflux thing, and like I saw the GI doctor about that and he didn't even really do anything. Like it ended up being like these ER doctors that I saw that like helped me with that. As I said, at this point I was tired of trying to convince doctors whenever I had issues that like, I'm having an issue, it could be serious, and they just brush it off. I was just like, whatever. It wasn't because I wanted to, it wasn't because I liked being sick. It was just like I'm so used to this whole like cycle of going to the doctors, telling them something's wrong, them like either like just like scratching the surface of looking into it and then saying, oh, everything's fine, and then just giving up. At this point I was just like, why bother going and trying to fight them on it? They're just not gonna believe me. But eventually in the fall it got like really bad. Like I stopped tolerating my feeds like just at all. Like first it started like being really painful for me, and like I would get really bad nausea and feel like I was like just wanting to throw up all the time. And so I had to start like decreasing my rate and also the amount. I already wasn't even getting the full amount that I'm supposed to because I also have issues with like tolerating like high quantities of volume through my tube. And like I would tell the dietitian and she would just be like, oh, just try increasing it. And I was like, I can't. Whenever I try increasing it, it makes like, I get all these GI issues and stuff. But like having to go to the bathroom a lot and pain and stuff. And she would just, I don't know, they just never really understood, or like I just don't think they understood like the gravity of some of the symptoms that I had. And so they were just kind of like, oh, just push through it. But it was like, I've tried and it doesn't work out. And so I was all like dehydrated, and because I wasn't getting enough like fluids in, and then I also wasn't getting like my nutrition that I needed in. And so like it just got really, really bad for me. So I finally ended up going to see my primary doctor, and I told her, I'm having all these issues, and like, could you help me out. The dietitian, so I talked to the dietitian, and like I was like mentioned, you know, oh, I think I'm maybe not tolerating my formula again, you know, could I try elemental? Because I was I was doing the Kate Farms, the 1.5 peptide, and you know, those are already like, peptide is already supposed to be like semi broken down. But if I wasn't tolerating that, then I figured, you know, the next step would be like elemental, because I had heard like a lot of people like saying, you know, when they can't tolerate other formulas, elemental, you know, is good because it's like it's the most broken down, the most basic thing. She's like, oh, well, we don't really do that commonly. And so she was like, I don't know, I'm just gonna talk to, I don't even know, like someone about it to see, like, I think she wanted me to try Peptamin, but I don't know, I figured that was probably like the same, because like I said, my Kate Farms was like peptide, but I mean, it ended up like not even, because like after I saw my PCP, like she was gonna be out, she was like, I'm gonna be out for like 2 weeks, because this was in November, so you know, like everyone was like leaving for like Thanksgiving or like vacation or whatever. She was gonna be out, and then the dietitian, after I talked to her, was gonna be out, so I was gonna have to wait until who knows when to like see any like resolution. But like I said, by this point I was just like in a really bad state. I had seen my rheumatologist like I think like 1 or 2 months prior, and like I had told them that the dysautonomia type symptoms were getting worse, and they were like, oh, you're probably like dehydrated. And I was like, okay, but like I can't, like they're just like, just drink more fluid, and like I can't drink orally, and they're like, we'll put it through the tube, and I'm like, I can't. They were just like, you know, talk to the dietitian, but the dietitian, she just tells me to, you know, try and put more through the tube, try and drink more orally, and I'm like, I can't. Like it's like they don't understand, they can't grasp the concept of me saying I can't do this. But you know, whatever. My PCP had told me to, like, you know, she was like, you know, if you get really bad, you know, just go to the ER. But the thing about going to the ER is that a lot of the time, like, they won't do anything for people like me, like people that have like chronic illness, like complicated cases and stuff. They really won't do anything. They'll just be like, oh, you know, see your specialist, see your GI or whatever. Like, and like I said, GI has never done anything for me. So it's like, yeah, fat chance of that happening. It's just gonna be a waste of time. I kind of wanted to go in and like get fluids, because like I said, I was having a hard time getting them through my mouth and through my tube. So I was like, I probably at this point, if they're saying I'm dehydrated, I'm probably been dehydrated for months. I need fluids. But I was also worried that they wouldn't even give me that, because before I had the tube, when I could barely eat anything by mouth, I had done that. I'd gone to the ER for like fluids, and they wouldn't give them to me. So I was like, you know, why bother? So at this point, like, my family was freaking out again, because, you know, it was starting to look like, you know, how it was before I got my feeding tube. Like, when I was just like, things were just going south, and everything just seemed to be like really bad, like health-wise for me. So finally they were like, you know, maybe we might have to go back to Mexico. And I hadn't gone back to Mexico since 2018, when I got the nasal tube put in. Like, ever since after that, when I came back and got the surgical tube, I've just been, you know, all my care has been done by that hospital that I go to. It is a hassle, you know, having to go to like a whole another country to, you know, see a doctor over there. But at this point it was like, what other option do we have? So we started looking into that, and meanwhile, you know, like, you know, we're just trying to figure out like what's going on, because it seems like it's not even just like the gastroparesis at this point. My brother, like, he was really worried about me, and I think he kind of like went on a whole like internet binge thing or whatever, like trying to figure out solutions or something. And he's the one actually who came across MALS. I mean, I had heard about it before, but I'd kind of just like looked into it at a glance, and then kind of just like dismissed it, like, oh, you know, some of those things kind of sound what I have. But at that point I already had like the gastroparesis diagnosis, so I'd assume, you know, that's my, you know, my issue. So I didn't really look into that. And I also don't want to be one of those people that's like, oh, you know, learns of a new condition, is like, oh, do I have that? Like, you know, I want to be one of those people. So he actually like looked into like stories from people, like, you know, that posted like videos about like how they were diagnosed with MALS, and he said like they sounded really similar to some of the stuff that I was going through. So he sent it to me, and, you know, I was at that point, I was still kind of reluctant, just because I don't know, I just felt like some of the things matched, but I wasn't sure like all of it. And also like trying to like fight, like trying to get the doctors to like, you know, look into a whole new thing. I just knew it'd be like horrible. But he and my dad became like, you know, convinced that this was something to look into. So we decided, you know, I'll go to Mexico and see a doctor over there to see if they can look into that, like do the tests that are needed to see if I have MALS. So we looked into finding a doctor over there in Mexico who could, you know, like order the tests and then, you know, give the diagnosis and do the treatment. So we looked into, like, we found a vascular surgeon over there in my mom's hometown, and we called and made an appointment. You know, we called and asked first. He was like, you know, we saw on your website that you treat this condition. And so, like, then we got a call back. They're like, yeah, you know, you can make an appointment. And so then you know, once that happened, we decided to get ready for the trip. Like, it was going to be me and my brother. He was going to accompany me to go see the doctor. And also, I ended up having to, like, have my brother pay for like one of those mobile IV thingies, like where they come to your house and they give you an IV, because I wasn't sure I was gonna make it to like make a trip, like, you know, from here to Mexico, like in the state that I was in. I was so, like I said, dehydrated, and also like, you know, I had lost probably a lot of, like, I had lost like weight because of the fact that I wasn't able to get all my formula, all my calories in. And so yeah, so we paid for like me to be able to, like, you know, get that. And because like I said, if I went to the hospital, I was so sure that they weren't even gonna do that for me. So, you know, just ended up having to, he ended up offering to pay for that. So, you know, we did that. The nurse came, she gave me fluids. You know, I explained to her why I needed them, and you know, she was like, yeah, unfortunately, I see that a lot. People that need, you know, fluids go to the hospital and they won't give them to them. And I was like, wow, it's really, you know, messed up. But, yeah, and like she took my blood pressure like before and then after the fluids, and she was like, yeah, you know, your pulse went down, your blood pressure went up. So, you know, obviously it, you know, I really needed that. But like I said, I was so skeptical that the hospital would do that for me. So I just didn't even bother. So after that, I think it was like a day or two after that that we ended up, you know, leaving for Mexico. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I tried to not ramble too much when I was telling my story, but if it is a little bit long, I'm sorry. I have a tendency to ramble. I try to control it, but I don't know, I can't really. I hope that this might have helped you, you know, learn something new about a new condition that maybe you didn't know about. Or, you know, if you have MALS and you're seeing this, I hope this, you know, helps you know that you're not alone, that someone else has kind of gone through something similar, that someone else knows a little bit about what you've been through, and, you know, solidarity and all of that. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it and if you want to see more videos from me like this, then please hit the subscribe button. And I hope that I'll see you in the next one. Bye!